Hi everyone, what I'm going to do is show you in this tutorial video how to complete your Module 305 presentation homework. You'll see from the updated homework instructions down below that you're going to create a 5 to 10 slide PowerPoint, and that's going to vary depending on the grade level, subject area, and student ability level that's targeted. And then these slides should cover about 5 minutes of continuous instructional content, not necessarily all the content in a lesson, just an excerpt. So if you are revamping an older PowerPoint from a lesson that you created previously, and it's like a 25-minute lesson, I don't need all of those slides. Just give me, 5 to 10 slides, whatever about 5 minutes of instructional content is from that presentation. You're going to start out with the title slide. It states the name of the lesson, the content area, and the grade level. You're going to have a second slide, and this goes over the student learning objectives known as SLOs. You need a minimum of 3 of those. And then relevant South Carolina state standards, or whatever state you want to teach in. You can also do that as an alternative, but you need a minimum of 1 state standard. I'll show you where to find those in just a minute. You have to have at least 5 examples of appropriate graphics. You need at least 1 slide that uses progressive animation in some way. You need at least 1 hyperlink to an external file or web page, and you need at least 1 embedded video file. So I'll show you how to complete all of those using this practice file down below here. Obviously, your lesson is going to be slightly different. It's not going to be just the practice file. You're going to, make this unique to whatever you want to teach, but I will use this practice file to really give you an understanding of what's required for this. So on this first slide, if we take a look at our criteria here, on the first slide, we need a title slide that states the name of the lesson, content area, and grade level. So here we're missing all of those different things, right? So I can go Insert, Text Box. I can call this Science, but I'm not quite sure which grade level aligns to what I have just yet. But we also need the content area, name of the lesson, and grade level. So I have Science. We have the name of the lesson, but I don't know the grade level yet. So what I'm going to do here is put a note that I'm going to fill in the grade level once I find it in the standards. You might have noticed that on the second page we need our student learning objectives and standards. We don't have that right here, so what we're going to do is add a new slide in here. So I'm just going to go New, Title, and Content. We're just going to call this Standards and Objectives. Keeping in mind our crop design principles, this is really bad, right? So there's not really good contrast, so I'm going to make this white. It's going to make it stand out a little bit more. And then in here is where we're going to write our, let's do student learning objectives. And then we also need our standards as well. Once again, this is really bad contrast. So I'm just going to make it, a plain white. Now, to find the standards, what we're going to do is go to our course resource website. And then if you go to the home page, I'm just going to open this in a new tab. And if you scroll down, there's a picture of a kid raising his hand here. If you click that, I'm just going to open it in a new tab. It's going to take you to the South Carolina State Standards for all the different subject areas. So I'm going to select Standards over here for Science, because this is a science lesson. And then our state standards are right here. Make sure that you read those titles carefully. What I'm going to do is just do a Control F. I believe on a Mac it's the Clover and F, and that's fine. So what I'm going to put in here is environment. And then each time the environment comes up, that word is going to come up. You could also be more focused. So mine's about like green energy and pollution. If I type in pollution here, it pops up 2 different times, right? So what we have is grade 5. We have the standard here, and then we have a bunch of different indicators below. But the student will demonstrate an understanding of how natural processes and human activities affect the features of Earth's landforms and oceans. So this is the standard that my lesson is going to be based around. Remember, I'm kind of reverse engineering this using a lesson that I previously had on my computer. I'm just going to copy that, and then under my standards, I'm just going to paste that as plain text. And you might need to doctor it a little bit so it looks a little bit better. And then keeping our crop design principles in mind, we have our standard, and then we need our student learning objectives. So we need at least 3 different student learning objectives. And the way that you would write these Some of you might not have written student learning objectives yet, but also on the course resource website I have this handy dandy little matrix here, and it's got all the different words that you should use when writing your student learning objectives. So these are all Webb's depth of knowledge, tiers. And then what you're going to do is choose, one of these words. Yes, you have to use these words that are within this matrix. What you shouldn't do is write, students will be able to learn, yada, 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 yada. Students will be able to do, yada, yada, yada. Those are very, very vague terms. They're not exact, and they're not what we use in education. So depending on, where you get your teaching job, there might be different ways of writing student learning objectives, but they're all going to follow the same formula. And that formula is starting out with students will be able to, and then you use one of those verbs from the course resource website. So students will be able to describe, that's a good one, describe reasons, describe advantages of green energy. So that would be a good one. Depending on where you are, your school district might have you add some things on here. So like in School District of Philadelphia, where I did my student teaching, we had to add with 80% accuracy by the end of the lesson, which is really ridiculous in my opinion, because like moral student learning objectives like analyzing the reasons for dropping the atomic bomb on Japan, you can't evaluate that with 80% accuracy by the end of the lesson. It's just ridiculous. But that's something else that you might see on student learning objectives. Another thing that you might see is SWABOT. Students will be able to, just a way to abbreviate your SLOs. So students will be able to, let's go with define. Define green energy, and then students will be able to list types of pollution. Okay, so we have our 3 student learning objectives. We have our state standards up above. Going back to the criteria here. So we have our first slide, we have our second slide. It's got a minimum 1 state standard and then minimum 3 learning objectives, so we got that. Next thing that we have to do is at least 5 examples of appropriate graphics, and then add at least 1 slide that uses a progressive animation technique. So moving on here, we're going to attack the progressive animation first. So you can see that I have this little kind of like review quiz created here, and what's really key for this is making sure that your questions are in a separate text box than your answers. See how each of these answers is in their own individual text box? That's key. That's really important. So what I would do is I would drag the text box for the answer over top of its associated slot. I'm going to do this. And then what we can do is add animations, which is a progressive disclosure technique to make these answers appear here. So I would click my first text box. I would go to animations, and then I would choose an animation for it. So that one's just going to appear. Fly in for the second one. Wheel. And wipe. And then when I go through and view this, those are going to fly in there, appear in there, based on the animations that I chose. Alternatively, what you could do is, like, if I wanted to add a new slide in here, blah, this is going to be example 1, example 2, example 3, and just so you can see it a little bit better, I'm going to make that a different color. Okay, so here's another thing that you could do. Line by line, you could progressively disclose this information by just highlighting a line of text, and then going to animations, and then going to, fly in, whatever it is. And I'll give you a little preview of, what each of those animations is going to look like, once you view it in presentation mode. But you could also have your information pop in, in this way. It's really your choice. But the whole idea behind progressive animation is you don't want little kids especially to get too far ahead, and they get so obsessed with writing down everything that's on screen they don't actually pay attention. So one way that you can keep them all kind of with you in class is to progressively disclose that information. So like, one, bullet point at a time maybe, and then really focus on that bullet point so that they can internalize that information. I'm going to delete this slide, don't need it. I went with the little review game here. We need 5, different examples of graphics. I already have those in here, but if you wanted to insert graphics, you just go Insert Pictures, and then you'd add it from your device, stored somewhere on your computer, stock images, or online pictures. So we already have that. Taking a look at our criteria here. We have 5 examples of appropriate graphics. We have our progressive animation. We need at least 1 hyperlink, and then we need 1 embedded video file. So for hyperlink, what can you do about pollution? I'm just going to do a quick Google search. There is a little website here from the EPA about what you can do as a concerned citizen about pollution. So I would just copy this URL up here, and then on this slide here, this what can you do? I can make this a clickable area. So there are 2 ways that you can add a hyperlink. The first one is you can highlight the text itself and then right click it and then go to link. For address, you would just paste. So you see that kind of changes your font color. If I hold Control and click this, it's going to open up that page in my web browser. But if you don't want it to change the color, the font color, what you can do is select the text box that it's in, click the little outside around it. See that little faint line that's around the outside? I'll click that and then right click that, and then go to link and then paste that link in there and then hit OK. And now if I control click this entire area, if I hover over it with control selected, it'll give me the little clicky finger, and that allows me to know that there's a link there. If I click that, it'll open up in a new page. Now for videos, what you can do to insert a video is you can go to video in the top right hand corner, you can select online video, and then you can paste in the URL for a video here, or you can go to video, videos on my PC, and you can add one that way. What we're going to do is go to the online videos, so you can enter the URL of a video right in here. So if I go to youtube.com and I search for green energy, maybe this is the video that I want. I would just copy the URL for it. I would go into my little online video area, paste it, and hit insert. It's going to take a couple seconds, but it will show up in there. You can resize it, and then when you play this video in presentation mode, you can click that little play button and it'll play that video natively within your video. Alright, so that is how you complete this week's assignment. Remember, 5 to 10 slides should be about 5 minutes of instructional content. Make sure that you have your title slide filled in with the title of the lesson, the content area, and the grade level. So now we know that this is 5th grade. So I can get rid of that note. You have your second slide that goes over your standards as well as your student learning objectives. Then you have those different pieces of criteria throughout, the progressive disclosure, your 5 different graphics, your hyperlink, and your embedded video. If you have any questions, please let your instructor know.